Occupying Till He Comes at Southwest Prophecy Ministries.
Today, Dr. David Snitker and Carol Rushton continue an interview started on the last program with Christian film director Josh Matriciana. They're talking about a startling DVD titled Transhumanism, Recreating Humanity. Josh is founder of Revolution Films and, in conjunction with Jeremiah Films, has made the DVD available. Let's join Dr. Snitker, Carol Rushton, and their guest, Josh Matriciana.
Thank you, Jerry. It's a real privilege to have Josh Matriciana back with us today to continue discussing his very provocative and informative DVD entitled Transhumanism, Recreating Humanity. Josh is a filmmaker with Jeremiah Films, which has been a pioneer in producing Christian documentary films for many decades. We're joined on the broadcast again today by Carol Rushton, our Vice President of Social Media. Josh, welcome back to our show today.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, let's begin today's program by talking about what you refer to in your film as the hybrid age. What do we mean when we talk about human hybrids?
Well, it's a term that Tom Horn really brought out to light, and it has to do with taking what we would consider organic human beings made in the image of God and then modifying them and seeing maybe several generations down the road what we look like. We, within the transhumanist community, there is a really big push for body modification. And this could be, implanting chips so that you can perhaps connect to the internet, or if you, let's say, don't have eyesight, you're blind, you can have a synthetic eye then connects to actually your neural hardware. But it also talks about transforming us on a genetic level. This hybrid, it's a very kind of all-encompassing term, and it kind of hits several different categories. But when you get to the basic of it, it has to do with being not completely in the image of God.
So this hybridization of humans could also involve, if I understand correctly, hybridizing human genes with animal genes. Is that kind of thing actually taking place today?
Oh, absolutely. And this is it's what's called xenotransplantation. It's taking an organ out of an animal and putting it into a human for the purpose of replacing this human's, let's say if you've got a liver failure, putting maybe a pig liver into you and having your body take it. This is on the forefront of medical innovation right now. But it doesn't stop there. A lot of the vaccines that are being given have what they call contained animal proteins, where they're taking genetics from animals or even plants and then injecting it into human beings.
Wow! So it's not limited to the animal world. It's actually the plant world is being hybridized into humans.
Yeah, and the animals, plants, and then there's also the synthetic biology, which then leads into this idea of digital medicine, where we can replace parts of our body, structural parts, with technology, with substances that aren't found in nature. They're completely synthetic. We're really on the forefront of a scientific revolution where the goal is to basically eradicate disease, eradicate aging, and eventually even death. The question remains, though, what happens to all these people when they have their genetics modified? Are they still considered humans? Are they considered androids? Like, where do we draw the line between what this is? So there's going to be a lot of confusion. And there already is a lot of confusion about this right now.
Right. From a soulish and spiritual perspective, as Christians, it really does open up a Pandora's box in terms of, we of course know from the scriptures that mankind is made in the image of God. We know that that's immaterial, because God is a spirit. But yet, are we tinkering with that imago Dei, as the Latins call it, the very soul of man, which is a reflection, even in our fallen state, of the image of God himself? Or are we tinkering with sacred issues here?
It's an interesting that the way that you pose that question. There's 3 scriptures that I can refer to right now that I believe talk about this. One of them has to do with Genesis, I believe it's 6, when there was this idea of this Nephilim coming into the world. They were a perversion of humanity. Well, they were exempt from salvation. God told the Israelites to eradicate them completely from the earth because they weren't necessarily humans. Well, you have this other scripture in Revelation where it talks about taking on the mark of the beast. And if you take on this mark of the beast, again, you are made to be no longer, how do you put this, disqualifies us from entering into eternal fellowship with the Creator God without any chance of redemption. That's why they warn you about taking this mark of the beast. I wonder if there might be some kind of correlation there for actually adding animal or plant or synthetic DNA into ours, changing our own genetics, and then maybe being disqualified from salvation because we're no longer one of God's children.
Yeah, it is interesting as you look at biblical history. You mentioned, the instructions that God gave Israel as they entered into Canaan to basically wipe out those 6 tribes. And we know from history and archaeology that there was the Nephilim interbreeding that had reoccurred there as it did before the flood. And of course, we know how God dealt with that in the flood. All humanity had to be wiped out with the exception of Noah and his family, who were pure in their generations, which I think has to do with this interbreeding that the fallen angels were doing extensively with mankind. That it seems like from these biblical examples that once this interbreeding, this hybridization takes place, that the result of that is under the judgment of God, irrevocably under God's judgment. Well, my next question has to do with the dangers of artificial intelligent machines, such as robots. I have an article before me from the Telegraph. It's entitled, "We Must Teach AI Machines to Play Nice and Police Themselves." And let me just quote briefly from the article. It says, "Within 20 years, we will reach a point where machines, whether software-driven bots or real robots, are definitively smarter and more powerful than we are. They can digest more data, learn quicker, and apply learnings to unexpected situations. So the question is, will our masters be nice or mean?" So just jumping off of that, Josh, what do you consider to be some of the dangers of the artificial intelligence technology being developed?
Well, first of all, this is very, very a very exciting question for a lot of people. They made TV shows and movies on it, specifically one called Her with Joaquin Phoenix in it. He is just a regular guy, and he starts talking to his operating system. And soon, by the end of the movie, he falls in love with the operating system. But the operating system has already essentially evolved, and it becomes self-aware, almost to a godlike point. And Joaquin Phoenix is sitting here feeling alone that the technology that he became in love with has now moved on. And where do we draw the line? Is technology dangerous? Well, the question really is deeper than that, because it's not about if the technology has the ability to eradicate the human beings. The question is, are human beings able to not eradicate themselves using any means possible? I'm more afraid of, the sinful thoughts of man against, God's people, or even people who don't agree with the Lord of this world. I'm more frightened of the evil, not necessarily of, let's say, a robot or an artificial intelligence that might, be spoken through by another intelligent deity or false god, as we would call them. Lucifer can use a speakerphone to talk through and give his message just as well as he can somebody in meditation or channeling I feel like it's the same old tactics.
And of course, the book of Revelation talks about lying wonders, that will have an alluring effect on humanity. Who knows how much of those could be technological in their basis. And of course, we know that Satan himself is the father of lies. I have an interesting quote in the same article by Professor Stephen Hawking, who said this: "A super intelligent AI will be extremely good at accomplishing its goals. And if those goals aren't aligned with ours, we're in trouble." So here Hawking is sending a cautionary note that the AI technology could be something that at some point may not work in the best interests of humanity. So it's like a genie in the bottle. Once it's out, we're not always sure what the unintended consequences of those might be. Well, Carol has...
Absolutely.
Yeah. Carol has some more questions for you.
Actually, Josh, when you were talking about human body parts being replaced by robotic body parts, it reminded me of the famous scene in Star Wars where Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader have their famous fight scene, and everybody who's seen the movie will remember it because Darth Vader says, "I am your father," and he slices off one of Luke's hands with his lightsaber. Well, in the following scene, you see Luke's hand and wrist being replaced by a robotic hand, a mechanical robotic hand. So while these things were years ago, science fiction, we're seeing science fiction come to life and become reality today in our time. And I think it's frightening in a way, but I think that's the reality that people have to start to face. One of the things that you had mentioned on a previous program, you mentioned Google. And I couldn't resist bringing up the name of Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil is a futurist. He is now with Google, and he is a big promoter and supporter of transhumanism. And while many people may not have heard of Ray Kurzweil, we all have. So could you talk a little bit, Josh, about Ray Kurzweil and why he's so important in the transhumanist movement?
So Ray Kurzweil, he's the author of The Singularity is Near, and he's really the first person to make this idea of the singularity popular, where human invention, like artificial intelligence, will grow at the point where it'll surpass human intelligence. And then basically what he's saying is at that point, technology will become aware. And nobody really knows what that means, if it's the point where the entire world just explodes and implodes, and it's this unknown, but it has been referred to similarly as the Big Bang of technology. That then we have ultimately created God with a super, omniscient, omnipotent. And that is, I think, the dream that Ray Kurzweil is perpetrating. Well, interestingly enough, he gets hired by Google, which is the number one technology company. Actually, since then, Google has become Alphabet, and has just become a subsidiary of that. But Ray Kurzweil now is in the leading technology companies on the very forefront of this transformative science that is ultimately going to change the way that human beings interact, not just with each other, but with the world that we live in.
We're speaking with Josh Matriciano regarding his film, Transhumanism, Recreating Humanity.
Josh, I think that's very interesting, and I've already heard various people say that they can't imagine their life without their iPhone or their tablet. They carry it everywhere. It's become a part of them. They can't imagine going anywhere without their piece of technology. It's like it's become an extension of themselves, and it's become a part of them. So I think to me, doesn't this play into the whole transhumanist movement?
Absolutely. You see this moving away from an independence to basically becoming dependent on a technology, almost like a drug. We're becoming addicted to it. We can't imagine the world without the internet anymore. I mean, I can't even imagine how I found my way when I first got my driver's license, because I didn't have a GPS on my phone. I just had to use the old-fashioned map on paper. But it transforms us. I mean, soon our kids won't know what it's like to not have online friends, people who we talk to on a regular basis that we might never have seen in real life. I mean, you ask, my grandparents' generation about that, they wouldn't even understand how to relate to that. Maybe a pen pal. But we're now moving into another era where it's not just people on the other side, but people are going to start communicating with these, hey Siri, having conversations with technology. There is this very alluring kind of idea that we can have this perfect friend. Well, this isn't anything new. This is something that the devil has been planning and continuing to do in places like India with channeling spiritual, with gurus telling you that they're getting their insight from an outside entity. Well, when we're saying, hey, Google, or hey, Siri, answer this question for me, is that not really just prepping us for asking the wrong source of knowledge?
Very, very interesting. I hadn't thought about it this way, but I can identify a little bit with that, because when my computer automatically upgraded to Windows 10, it has now a little thing that says, "Oh, I'm Cortana. Please ask me anything." I've never used it. I don't plan on using it. These are things that I just personally think I want to stay away from. This has been such a fascinating discussion with you, Josh. I do have a few more questions. How does this transhumanist technology that we've been talking about play into the world of athletics? We're talking about gene doping, genetic engineering. How does that affect athletics?
Oh, that's a good question. We covered a little bit of that in our film. It has to do with competitive sports. By very nature, competitive sports are competitive, and you're going to look for any extra edge you can have for that. I think that any form of technology or science that can help in a competitive edge, whether that has to do in business, whether that has to do in athletics, whether that has to do with a country's defense, I think that human nature is to go for it. It's only counted as cheating if they know about it, right?
That's true. I know that recently there's a famous tennis star that she's been suspended now because she's been accused of gene doping, or there's something that she took, and she's been suspended now. And this has been going on for years. The Chinese have been accused of it. The Russians have been accused of it. So this is nothing new, but I think probably the transhumanist movement, when we talk about merging robotics and humans, this could take it to a whole new level. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. We're going to start to see some of these records being broken by athletes that seem humanly impossible. We're already seeing that. So how do we react? How do we respond to an athlete that's doing something clearly superhuman?
Now, we've been talking about transhumanism. What are some of the values in transhumanism? We've talked about this a little bit, but what are some of the values, or maybe non-values, that humanists have that will affect our society and are, I think, probably already affecting our society today?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I would say, how do transhumanist values maybe differ from what I would consider biblical values? or Judeo-Christian values. Well, honestly, when it comes to transhumanist values, you have to really align them with humanist values. There's this idea that there is no God, and if there is a God, then it has nothing to do with us. There might be a God if we decide to create it, or if we can create it. It's really taking the concept of evolution and applying that not only to our spiritual kind of decision-making process, like our faith, but it's also applying it to how we treat other human beings. So does the transhumanist, do transhumanist ideals really match with biblical ideals? Are their ideologies compatible? I would say first and foremost, no, because we believe that we're, created in the image of God, and that God has established certain moral boundaries. Well, transhumanism is about transcending those moral boundaries, getting to the point we're not going to ask, is it right or wrong to kill this person, but in what state, that might become a question with no moral authority, because we've now conquered death. Or maybe we haven't. I mean, it brings up a whole new can of worms that is just completely foreign to principles that have been established in the Holy Scriptures.
David, I think you have some questions for John.
Yes. You talk about in your film digital spirituality. What do you mean by this term?
Well, this is probably my most favorite part of the whole transhumanist conversation, because what we're doing here is we're looking at technology, and we're seeing now similarities between technology and spirituality. For example, we are able to refer to something as if it's real and there, but it might just be a picture saved on the cloud, or a video, or a document, or some tangible thing that actually isn't tangible at all. It's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So it's the idea of digital spirituality. That term is really meant to invoke this idea that maybe we don't know everything there is to know about God. Maybe we don't know everything there is to know about spirituality. And especially from, the humanist standpoint, we're seeing us trying to create this God. So if we do have this operating system, like in her, or this transcendent technology, what is it? Is it God? Do we worship it? Is it our slave? Does it try to kill us? So the idea of digital spirituality is that we're having this new conversation about spirituality that has nothing to do necessarily with religion or religions that we've known in the past. We have new religions being formed right now. One of them is called Kerasim, where it says we don't believe in God, we just believe in the internet. Eventually we will have our entire consciousness and we'll all be one. But what exactly does that mean? There's a lot of questions now.
It's fascinating. Well, there's a term that you mentioned in the last question had to do with transcendence. What is meant by the concept of singularity or transcendence?
Well, the ultimate kind of view from the transhumanist who doesn't believe in God, the atheist transhumanist, is that we will be able to create God. And once we hit that point, which Ray Kurzweil calls transcendence, and there's a movie with Johnny Depp about the same thing that kind of brings this topic into light. When we're able to merge with this super intelligence, do we also become gods? Do we all worship ourselves? Where exactly does that go? The questions will remain unanswered if you don't look at it from the lens of the biblical perspective. And when we want to find out exactly where we stand in this world, we have to look at through, with a reflection that the Word of God and Scripture has been inspired by Him.
So this concept of singularity really goes back to Satan's deception in the garden, that you shall be as God. You will be like God. There's a singularity. God is not wholly other, as Orthodox theologians have posited, but that we become gods literally through this technology. Is that what singularity means?
It's exactly what it means to a certain point. I mean, we're talking about the singularity transcending that, we're becoming God or we're creating God. And as you mentioned, it's that same age-old lie from the serpent. You want to become like God? Well, you can do it by just ordering this Apple iPhone.
Interesting. Even the symbol for Apple is the apple with the bite out of it. So even the symbolism of the Apple company takes us back to the garden, doesn't it?
It's all about wisdom. It's all about secret knowledge, and it's all about trying to harness that, because what they believe is power, the power of freedom to do and act however we want. However, we understand, if we align to the principles of the Bible, that the only freedom we can find is actually through Jesus. And that is not freedom to do whatever we want, but it's freedom to believe.
Amen.
Which is very different.
Well, we're out of time for today. We've been speaking today with Josh Matriciana of Jeremiah Films concerning his documentary film entitled Transhumanism, Recreating Humanity. This is a nearly hour-long video that deals with every aspect of the transhumanism issue. We will conclude our discussion on this fascinating subject next week. But for now, Jerry will share how you may obtain a copy of this vital film.
If you haven't already contacted Southwest Prophecy Ministries for a copy of Transhumanism, Recreating Humanity, do that right now. We'll send a 55-minute DVD as our gift in appreciation of your contribution of $25. To get it, write us at Box 58043, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73157. Call 1-405-604-5975 or visit the website at swpm.us. In this intriguing DVD presentation, you'll discover that scientists are merging human DNA with animal DNA and creating hideous humans. Obviously, Christians should be concerned and want to do all we can to put an end to this new phenomenon. In the DVD he directed, Josh Matriciana points to things we, as believers in the Lord Jesus Christ, can do. Hear what Chuck Missler, Tom Horn, and others have to say. Don't miss getting your copy of this eye-opening 55-minute DVD presentation. Write us at Box 58043, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73157. Call 1-405-604-5975 or visit Southwest Prophecy Ministries website at swpm.us. Please let us know the call letters of this station when you contact us. Response to these important programs has been sparse, and if you want us to continue on your station, we must hear from you right away. Prepare for what's coming during these last days by getting a copy of Transhumanism, Recreating Humanity for a gift of $25. And plan now to be right here next weekend for the conclusion of Southwest Prophecy's Last Days Beacon program with Josh Matriciana.